The Silence Between the Lines. Chapter 1. The old cedar chest sat in the attic, forgotten and dusty, a relic of a life lived long before mine. My mother, bless her soul, had always been a saver, a keeper of memories tucked away in boxes and trunks, each one a time capsule waiting to be opened. After she passed, the task of sorting through it all fell to me, Sarah, 58 years old, a widow for 7, with grown children living their own busy lives. The attic was my quiet space now, a place where I could feel close to her, surrounded by the echoes of our shared past. This particular chest had been in the house longer than I could remember. Dark wood, heavy, with intricate carvings I'd never truly looked at. It was locked, and for years, nobody had bothered with it. The key was lost, or so we thought. But tucked inside my mother's old sewing basket, beneath spools of thread and thimbles, I found a small tarnished brass key. It felt heavy and important in my hand. Dusting off the chest, I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, a sound that seemed to reverberate through the silence of the attic. Lifting the heavy lid, I was met not with the expected musty smell of old clothes, but something else, the faint, sweet scent of lavender and dried roses. Inside, nestled amongst layers of tissue paper, were bundles of letters tied with faded ribbons, a stack of old photographs, and a single, worn, leather-bound diary. My mother had never mentioned this chest or its contents. It felt like I was uncovering a secret, stepping into a part of her life she had kept entirely private. My hands trembled slightly as I picked up the diary. The cover was soft, the pages brittle with age. The handwriting inside was delicate, looping, familiar. My mother's hand, but younger, less hurried than the notes she'd leave on the kitchen counter. The first entry was dated June 14th, 1965. I did the math quickly. She would have been just 20 years old. It was around the time she met my father, but before they were married. I settled onto an old upholstered stool, the dust motes dancing in the single beam of sunlight filtering through the attic window, and began to read. The early entries were typical of a young woman. Thoughts about boys, friends, dreams for the future. But soon, a different tone emerged, a growing excitement, then a nervousness. She wrote about a young man named David, a charming, kind boy with laughter in his eyes. Their meetings were secret, stolen moments by the riverbank, whispers under the moon. My father's name wasn't mentioned at all in these early pages. Then, the entries became more sporadic, filled with anxiety. Phrases like, "What will I do?" and "How can I tell them?" appeared. The handwriting became shaky. And then a gap. Weeks, maybe months, went by with no writing. When the entries resumed, the tone was desolate. September 3rd, 1966. He's gone. David is gone, shipped out. No letter, no word, just gone. What am I going to do? I can't face this alone. The shame, the fear. I paused, my heart pounding. Shame? Fear? What was she hiding? I flipped through more pages, searching for clues. The entries remained bleak, filled with references to her condition and the need for secrecy. She wrote about her parents' disapproval, the hushed whispers in their small town. It became clear, with a sickening lurch in my stomach, what she was writing about. My mother, before she married my father, had been pregnant, But who was David? And what happened? I had never heard his name before. My parents' love story, as I knew it, began with them meeting at a local dance and falling quickly in love. There was no mention of anyone before my father. The diary continued, detailing her efforts to hide her pregnancy, the fear of discovery. She wrote about the kindness of a distant aunt who lived in a neighboring town, who offered her a place to stay until things were sorted. The entries from that time were full of longing for David and a growing, tender love for the life growing inside her. Then another gap, a longer one this time. When the writing started again, the tone was different, resigned, sad but with a strange strength. May 10th, 1967. It's done. He's gone. My beautiful baby boy. These said it was for the best. For him. For me. A fresh start. No one needs to know. It's like he was never here. But how can they say that? How can they just take him? My heart is broken. A baby boy. My mother had a son before me, before my siblings, a son she gave away. The chest felt heavier now, the air in the attic thick with unspoken grief. This was the secret she had carried for 50 years. A lost child. My older brother, somewhere out there, who I never knew existed. I put the diary down, tears blurring the old ink. My mother, the strong, practical woman I knew, had endured this unimaginable pain in secret. Why had she never told us? Why had she buried this life, this child, in a locked chest? I turned to the letters. They were bundled into 2 groups. One set, tied with a blue ribbon, were addressed to my mother in a man's strong, confident hand. The other, tied with a pink ribbon, were thinner, more delicate, addressed to a dear Sarah. In my mother's younger handwriting, I opened the letters tied with the blue ribbon first. The dates matched the time my mother was pregnant. They were from David. He was in Vietnam. The letters were filled with his love for her, his hopes for their future, his plans to come back and marry her as soon as his tour was over. He talked about building a little house by the river, raising a family. He mentioned her letters, full of her worries. But he didn't seem to fully grasp the depth of her situation from his side of the world. He thought she was just scared about him being away. The last letter from him was dated April 1967, just before my mother wrote that last heartbreaking entry in the diary about giving the baby away. He talked about coming home soon, excited to see her, excited for their life together. He had no idea about the baby. Or maybe he did. And his last letter was a desperate attempt to cling to the future they had planned. My hands shook as I opened the letters tied with the pink ribbon. These were unsent letters from my mother to David. Page after page, she poured out her heart, her fear, her shame, her love for him, her agony over the baby. She wrote about how she couldn't tell him the full truth in her letters because she was afraid they would be intercepted, afraid of the consequences for him. She wrote about the pressure from her family, the societal judgment. She wrote about the baby's birth, describing his tiny hands and feet, the shock of red hair he had, just like David's. She wrote about the pain of signing the papers, the emptiness she felt afterwards. She never sent them. These letters were her silent scream, her private grief. In one letter, dated just a week after giving the baby away, she wrote, "My dearest David, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I couldn't tell you, not fully, not in letters that might be read by others. I was so scared. Scared for you, scared for me, scared for our baby, Yes, David, our baby, a beautiful boy. He was born on May 1st. He has your eyes, your hair. But I couldn't keep him. They said it was impossible. I was too young, unmarried, no means to support him. My family, they arranged everything. An adoption. A good family, they promised. But they took him, David. They took our son, and I didn't even get to name him. My heart is shattered. I don't know how I will live with this. I love you. I will always love you. But I am broken. I sobbed quietly in the dusty attic, the weight of her secret pressing down on me. My mother had lived with this immense sorrow hidden deep within her for 50 years. She had lost the love of her life, and she had lost their child, all while putting on a brave face and building a new life with my father. My father, who I loved dearly, and who had been a wonderful husband and father to us. Had he ever known? Did he know about David? Did he know about the baby? The letters offered no clue. I continued to read, piece by piece, the puzzle of my mother's hidden life coming together. The letters detailed her attempts to find David after he returned from Vietnam. She wrote about going to his family's house, only to be told he had moved away. No forwarding address. She wrote about feeling lost and alone, carrying her secret grief. The diary entries picked up after she met my father. They were different now. Less raw pain, more a quiet sadness woven into the fabric of her new life. She wrote about my father's kindness, his steady love, how he healed some of the wounds, but not all. She wrote about the bittersweet pain of having us, her later children, loving us fiercely, but always with the ghost of the son she lost lurking in the background. She never forgot him. Scattered throughout the later diary entries were small notes, anniversaries she marked in secret. May 1st, his birthday. She wondered where he was, what he looked like, if he was happy. The photographs were next. Most were of my mother and father, some wedding pictures, early family photos. But tucked at the very bottom, wrapped in the tissue paper, were a few older ones. A photo of a young man in a military uniform, smiling shyly. David. Another of my mother, young and radiant, standing next to him, their hands clasped. And one, a small, blurry photo, clearly taken in secret, of a tiny baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. Red fuzz on his head. My brother, the son she never named, the face she only saw for a few brief moments. Holding that tiny photo, I felt a fierce protective love for this unknown brother. He would be in his late 50s now, a man, living a life I knew nothing about. Had he known he was adopted? Had he ever wondered about his birth parents? Chapter 2. Days turned into weeks as I meticulously went through the contents of the chest. The letters, the diary, the few photographs. They painted a vivid picture of a hidden life, a silent sorrow that had shaped my mother in ways I had never understood. I saw her not just as my mother, but as a young woman facing an impossible situation, making heartbreaking choices in a time when options for unmarried mothers were few and often cruel. The sheer volume of her unspoken pain weighed on me. How had she carried this for so long? It explained so much, her occasional moments of faraway sadness, her fierce protectiveness of us, her almost obsessive need to keep things neat and proper, likely a reaction to the perceived shame of her youth. I felt a strong need to find him, my brother, this man who was half of my mother, half of this unknown David. I had his father's name, the approximate date of his birth, the town where he was born, mentioned in one of the letters detailing the adoption arrangements. It wasn't much, but it was a start. My own children, bless them, thought I was just finally getting around to clearing out Mom's attic. I didn't tell them what I had found. This felt like my burden to carry, my quest to undertake. Finding my brother felt like honoring my mother's memory, giving voice to the silence she had lived with. Starting felt overwhelming. Where do you even begin to look for someone given up for adoption over 50 years ago? I knew very little about adoption records from that era. Were they sealed? Could I even access them? I started with online searches, searching for adoption agencies in the town she mentioned, searching for public records. It was like trying to find a single grain of sand on a vast beach. The internet, usually so powerful in connecting people, felt useless against the veil of secrecy surrounding adoptions from the 1960s. I decided I needed expert help. I found an adoption search support group online, a forum for people looking for lost family members and adoptees searching for birth parents. The stories shared there were heartbreaking and inspiring. People had been searching for decades. It wasn't going to be easy. I posted a query, sharing the few details I had. Birth date May 1st, 1967, born near the town of Willow Creek. Birth mother's name, using my mother's maiden name from that time. Birth father possibly named David, who served in Vietnam. I kept my post intentionally vague, protecting my family's privacy while still hoping to connect with someone who might have information or advice. Responses trickled in. Some were messages of support. Others offered general advice on navigating adoption records. One message, however, caught my eye. It was from a woman named Brenda, who specialized in helping people find family members through DNA testing and genealogical research. Her message was practical and encouraging. She explained the complexities of sealed records, but suggested that DNA testing was often the most powerful tool. She recommended a specific DNA testing service that had a large database of users, increasing the chances of finding a match. DNA testing. It felt strange, almost like science fiction, to think that a saliva sample could unlock secrets from the past. But I was desperate. I ordered a kit. Waiting for the results felt like an eternity. I tried to distract myself, continuing to sort through the rest of the attic, but my mind kept drifting back to the possibility of finding him. What would he be like? Would he want to know us? Would he resent being given away? When the email finally arrived, informing me my results were ready, my heart leaped into my throat. I clicked the link, my hands trembling again. The website showed my genetic matches, a list of people with whom I shared DNA. My closest matches were my confirmed family members, my children, my siblings, a few cousins. But further down the list, categorized as a close relative, was a name I didn't recognize: Thomas Miller. The estimated relationship was half-sibling. I stared at the screen, tears welling up again. Thomas Miller. This had to be him, my brother, the son my mother had silently grieved for 50 years. The website provided a way to message matches. I drafted a message carefully, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. How do you introduce yourself to a stranger and drop a bombshell like, "I think I'm your half-sister. and our mother gave you up for adoption. I decided honesty, delivered gently, was the best approach. I introduced myself, explained that I was doing genealogical research and had recently discovered a family secret. I mentioned the approximate birth date and the town, asking if any of that resonated with him. I explained about my mother, her youth, the circumstances. I emphasized that I wasn't looking to disrupt his life, only to connect, to share the truth about his birth mother, if he was open to it. I included my phone number and email address. I sent the message and then paced my living room for hours, the silence of my empty house amplifying my anxiety. What if he didn't respond? What if he was angry? What if he wanted nothing to do with me? The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I checked my email constantly. No response. The day dragged on. Doubt started to creep in. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some other explanation for the DNA match. Just as I was about to give up hope for the day, my phone rang. An unknown number with a local area code, the same one as my town. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a deep breath and answered, "Hello? Sarah? Is this Sarah?" The voice was male, hesitant. "Yes, this is Sarah. This is Thomas Miller. I got your message on the DNA site." His voice was quiet, cautious. I could hear the uncertainty in it. "Thomas," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for calling." I don't know what to say," he admitted. "Your message, it was a shock, a big shock." "I understand," I said softly. "It was a shock for me too, discovering all of this." You said my birth mother?" "Yes," I confirmed. "My mother. Her name was Eleanor. She passed away a few years ago. She never spoke of this. I found her diary and some letters. It seems she had you when she was very young before she married my father. The circumstances, they were difficult back then. She loved you very much, Thomas. Her writings make that clear. She never forgot you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I waited, giving him space to process this earth-shattering news. Finally, he spoke, his voice a little stronger now, but still laced with disbelief. I knew I was adopted. My parents told me when I was a teenager. They were wonderful parents. I had a good life. I never really searched. Part of me was afraid of what I might find, I guess. "I understand," I said again. "There's no pressure, Thomas. I felt you deserved to know. To know about her. About David, your birth father, if you're interested in that too. He was in love with her, and he was in Vietnam at the time." "David?" he repeated, the name unfamiliar. "Yes, I have some letters from him too. He sounds like a good man." It's a lot to take in," he said. "I know, if you need time, that's perfectly fine. But if you ever want to talk more or meet, I'd really like that, to get to know you." He was quiet for a moment. Then, maybe we could meet sometime when I've had a chance to absorb this. A wave of relief washed over me. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "Yes, I would like that very much, Thomas." We exchanged contact information, promising to be in touch soon. Hanging up the phone, I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. Tears of relief and sadness streaming down my face. 50 years of silence, finally broken. Chapter 3, Meeting Thomas for the first time was surreal. We agreed to meet for coffee at a quiet cafe halfway between our towns. As I waited for him, butterflies fluttered in my stomach. What if we had nothing in common? What if it was awkward? He walked in. and I recognized him immediately from his profile picture on the DNA site. A man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a receding hairline. He had my mother's smile, but his build and something about the set of his jaw reminded me of the photo of David in the chest. He looked nervous, too. We greeted each other tentatively, a mix of strangers and family. Sitting down, the initial awkwardness hung in the air. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I said, breaking the silence. "Thank you for reaching out, Sarah," he replied. "It took a lot of courage, I imagine." "It did," I admitted, "but finding everything, I felt like I had to, for my mother." We talked for hours. I shared what I had learned from the diary and letters, the story of my mother and David, the circumstances of his birth and adoption, her lifelong grief. I showed him copies of the photos, of David, of my mother as a young woman, of the tiny baby with red hair. He listened intently, his expression shifting from shock to sadness to a quiet understanding. He shared his own life story, growing up with loving adoptive parents, his childhood, his career, his family. He was married with 2 grown children. He had a good life. Hearing that eased a part of my own anxiety. "I had a happy childhood," he said. "My parents were wonderful. But there was always a part of me that wondered about where I came from, who she was, who he was." "She loved you, Thomas," I said, my voice firm. "She really did. The letters, the diary, they're full of her love and her pain. She wrote about you on your birthday every year, wondering where you were." He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the blurry photo of himself as a baby. "She didn't even name me," he said softly, a touch of sadness in his voice. "She wanted to," I said quickly. "She wrote about wanting to, but the agency, the family, they handled all of that. It was taken out of her hands." We talked about David. I shared the letters, the story of his love for my mother, his hopes for their future. Thomas learned about the father he never knew, a young man who went to war, likely never knowing he had a son. "Do you think he ever came back?" Thomas asked. "David?" "I don't know," I admitted. "My mother tried to find him after he returned, but his family said he'd moved away. She never heard from him again. The war, it changed so many people. It's possible he didn't survive. Or maybe he did and was changed. And he didn't want to reconnect with his past. Or maybe he just didn't know," Thomas mused. "Maybe he came back. His family didn't tell him about my mother or me, and he just started a new life, never knowing." That possibility hung between us, a new layer of sadness to an already poignant story. As the hours passed, the initial awkwardness melted away, replaced by a growing sense of connection. We were strangers, yes, but we shared a deep, fundamental bond, the blood of our mother. We talked about our families, our lives, our hopes and fears. We discovered little similarities, a shared love for old movies, a similar dry sense of humor. By the end of our meeting, it felt less like meeting a stranger and more like reconnecting with a lost piece of my family, a brother I never knew I had. We promised to stay in touch, to build a relationship. Finding Thomas brought a complex mix of emotions. There was the joy and relief of finding him, of fulfilling my silent promise to my mother's memory. There was the sadness for my mother's hidden pain, for the life she was forced to let go of. And there was a new, bittersweet connection with a brother I was just getting to know. My children were surprised when I told them. It was another layer of family history they had never known. They were curious and supportive, eager to meet their Uncle Thomas. Thomas also told his family. His wife and children were understanding and welcoming. It wasn't easy for them either, this sudden addition to their family tree, this new branch that stretched back to a hidden past. But they embraced it with grace and kindness. We started integrating Thomas into our lives, family dinners, holiday gatherings. It was strange and wonderful at the same time. He fit in seamlessly, and that's what it took. His quiet strength and gentle humor, a welcome addition to our family dynamic. Chapter 4. As Thomas and I grew closer, a new question began to surface. What about David, Thomas's birth father, my mother's first love? Did he ever make it back from Vietnam? Did he ever have a family? Did he live a good life? Thomas was hesitant at first. He had his father now, the man who raised him with love and kindness. But the mystery of David lingered. Knowing about him, reading his letters, made him a real person, not just a name in a diary. We decided to try and find him, or at least find out what happened to him. With David's name, his approximate age, and the fact that he served in Vietnam, we had a few more clues to work with. We started with military records. It was a painstaking process, navigating government websites and privacy regulations. We learned that David James Miller had indeed served in Vietnam during the specified time. His service records indicated he had completed his tour and was honorably discharged. He had made it home. But where did he go after that? We searched for him in public records, social media, online obituaries. The name David Miller was common, making the search difficult. We found several possibilities, but nothing concrete, nothing that definitively matched the young man in the photo. I remembered the letters my mother wrote about trying to find him after he returned, going to his family's house. Maybe his family could provide some answers. The letters mentioned the town his family lived in, a small, rural community a few hours' drive away. It felt like a long shot, but we decided to go. Thomas and I drove there on a crisp autumn day, the leaves turning brilliant shades of red and gold. The town was small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. We found the street mentioned in my mother's letters. An old farmhouse stood on a hill, a sprawling property with barns and fields. It looked well-maintained, lived in. Our hearts pounded as we pulled into the driveway. A woman was working in the garden, her back to us. As we approached, she turned. She was older, her face lined but kind. Her hair a soft gray. "Excuse me," I said, my voice nervous. "We're looking for the Miller family." "You found them," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm Martha Miller. Can I help you?" My hands trembled as I held out the old photo of David. "We're looking for David Miller," I said. "The young man in this photo." Martha's eyes widened as she took the photo. Her hand went to her chest. "David," she whispered. Her voice choked with emotion. "Oh, my word." "You knew him?" Thomas asked, his voice tight. "Knew him?" Martha's eyes filled with tears. "He was my brother." Relief and sadness washed over us. We had found his family. Martha invited us inside. The farmhouse was warm and inviting, filled with family photos. We sat at her kitchen table, and she told us about David. He had come back from Vietnam, she said, but he was changed. The war had taken a toll. He struggled. He wasn't the same bright, happy young man who had left. He never talked much about the war or about his time before it. He had tried to settle back into life at home, but he was restless. He worked on the farm for a while, but his heart wasn't in it. After a few years, he left. He just packed a bag and left one morning, leaving a note saying he needed to find his own way. "We didn't know where he went," Martha said, tears streaming down her face. "He'd call sometimes, from different places, never stayed in one place for long. He was searching for something, I think, or maybe running away from something." She paused, wiping her eyes. "He never married, never had children that we knew of. He died about 10 years ago. Heart attack. He was living down south in a small town." Our hearts sank. David was gone. He had died never knowing he had a son. "Did he ever mention a girl named Eleanor?" I asked, my voice quiet. "From Willow Creek?" Martha frowned, thinking. "Eleanor?" she repeated. "The name sounds vaguely familiar." Wait. Her eyes lit up with recognition. "Yes, Eleanor. He used to talk about her constantly before he left for the war. Wrote her letters, said he was going to marry her. We never understood what happened. He just stopped talking about her after he came back. We assumed they broke up." "They didn't," I said softly. "My mother, Eleanor, she loved him. She tried to find him after he came back. She came here looking for him." Martha looked stunned. "She did? Oh, if only we had known. He was here for a few years after the war. If only we had connected them." The weight of missed connections, of secrets kept and opportunities lost, settled heavily in the room. My mother, searching for him struggling with his demons, never knowing how close he was to the woman who loved him and the son he never knew existed. "There's something else," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "When my mother was looking for David, she was pregnant with his child. She had a son." Martha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Thomas sat silently beside me, his face pale. "A son?" Martha whispered. "David had a son?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Born May 1st, 1967. My mother had to give him up for adoption. And Thomas." I turned to my brother. "Thomas is that son." Martha stared at Thomas, her eyes wide with disbelief and wonder. "David's son," she breathed. She reached across the table and gently took Thomas's hand. "Oh, bless his heart. David had a son he never knew." Tears streamed down Martha's face, tears of sadness for her brother, and tears of joy at meeting his son. She told us more about David's life after the war, his struggles, his quiet nature. She shared old family stories, giving Thomas glimpses into the man his birth father had become. We spent hours with Martha, sharing stories, piecing together the fragments of a life lived and a love lost. We learned that David, despite his struggles, had been a kind man, a good brother. He had carried his own burdens, his own unspoken pain, likely exacerbated by the trauma of war and the quiet grief of losing touch with the woman he loved. Finding David's family, even after his death, brought a sense of closure. Thomas learned more about his father, the man whose blood ran in his veins. I learned more about the young man who had captured my mother's heart and whose absence had cast a long shadow over her life. Before we left, Martha gave Thomas a small box filled with some of David's belongings. A worn leather wallet, a few old photos from his childhood, his military dog tags. Holding these tangible pieces of his birth father's life, Thomas's connection to his past felt more real, more grounded. Chapter 5: The discovery of my mother's secret, the finding of my brother Thomas, and the connection with David's family fundamentally changed my life. The dusty chest in the attic had not just contained old papers. It had held a hidden history, a legacy of love, loss, and resilience. My relationship with Thomas grew stronger. We were more than just half-siblings. We were friends, bonded by our shared history and our mother's silent sacrifice. We talked often, shared family events, and built a connection that felt both new and deeply familiar. Our children became cousins, weaving new threads into the tapestry of our family. I spent a lot of time reflecting on my mother. Understanding her past, her hidden pain, didn't diminish my love for her. It deepened it. I saw her strength, her resilience, her ability to build a loving family despite the immense sorrow she carried. She had been forced into an impossible situation, and she had survived it, carrying her grief in silence, protecting her secret to shield us, her later children, from potential shame or disruption. I also thought about David, the young man in the photo, full of hope and love, changed by war, carrying his own burdens, never knowing about the son he had. His story was a poignant reminder of the hidden costs of conflict, the lives irrevocably altered, the connections broken. The letters and diary became precious artifacts. I kept them safely, a tangible link to a hidden past. I reread them often, each time gaining new insights into my mother's young heart, her struggles, her enduring love. One day, sorting through some later photos of my mother, I found a small, folded piece of paper tucked into the back of a frame. It was dated just a few months before she passed away. Her handwriting was shaky now, weakened by illness. To my dear children, it began, "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. There is something I kept hidden for many years, a secret I carried because I didn't know how else to protect you, or myself, from the pain and the judgment. In the chest in the attic, you will find my diary and some letters. They tell the story of my youth, of a love I lost, and a child I had to give away. My son, your brother. Please understand that I did the best I could in a difficult time. My greatest regret is not finding him, not knowing if he had a good life. If you ever find these things, and if you are able, please try to find him. Tell him I loved him. Tell him I never forgot him. Tell him he was always in my heart. And know that I loved all of you fiercely. My life with your father and with all of you was a blessing. Do not let my past sorrow overshadow your present joy. But know the truth." Tears streamed down my face as I read her words. She had intended to tell us. She had left a breadcrumb trail, a way for us to find the truth if we ever looked deep enough. Her final wish, her unspoken plea, had been for us to find her lost son. We had fulfilled her wish. Thomas knew. He knew about her love, her sacrifice, her lifelong sorrow. He knew about David, the father he never met. I showed the note to Thomas. He read it slowly, his eyes filling with tears. "She wanted us to know," he whispered. "She wanted me to know." The note brought a final layer of closure, a confirmation of her love and her intentions. It lifted a weight I didn't realize I was still carrying. the unspoken question of whether I had the right to uncover and share her secret. Her note gave me that right, that blessing. Our family story was bigger, more complex, and more beautiful than I had ever known. It was a story of hidden love, unimaginable loss, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unexpected ways families are found and connected across time and silence. The silence between the lines of my mother's diary and letters had finally been filled with the voices of the present, with the laughter of reunited family, with the quiet understanding of shared history. The chest in the attic was no longer a repository of a buried secret, but a testament to a mother's enduring love and the power of truth to heal and connect, even across generations. My mother's sorrow became a pathway to a new, unexpected joy, a testament to the fact that even the deepest pain can eventually lead to healing and connection. And in the quiet moments, I sometimes felt her presence, smiling down at us, her heart finally at peace. The lost child was found, the secret was revealed, and the family, in a way none of us could have ever predicted, was finally whole.